Well, the IAE is a 501c3 institute. We are a public group. We see ourselves as a connector between consumers and the government and between industry and the government. And we just really want to get across the right way to do things.
The Division of Advertising Practices put out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on issues relating to endorsements and reviews. So yes, we are thinking about all of our tools that we can use that are in our statute, and rules are an important one. Advertising Practices does a lot of national advertising issues. Right now we're interested in digital, social media type advertising issues, health claims, things like that. Division of Financial Practices would be doing financial products and services, fintech, lending issues, automobiles, things like that. So the FTC broadly, the FTC Act prohibits unfair, deceptive acts or practices, which includes false advertising. From the Division of Advertising Practices perspective, we will talk about what we're going to do, but it's a lot of national advertising, digital advertising issues, online reviews, health claims. There are a number of other divisions that touch on advertising issues in their own focus. So the Division of Financial Practices will deal with advertising related to financial products or financial technology issues. The Division of Marketing Practices deals with business opportunities, franchises, multi-level marketing, frauds, things like that. The Division of Enforcement deals with, of course, they enforce our orders. They also enforce certain types of rules that relate to advertising. For example, the recent Made in the USA advertising rule is enforced by them. And the Division of Privacy and Identity Protection, of course, deals with privacy issues and data security, and some of that touches on advertising, like privacy policies and things like that.
One thing that we really want to do in IAE is get out to advertisers requirements that are coming from FTC. And so I just to start with the basic requirements here of in regard to what you have for a prior reasonable basis, and also ad claims, including material disclosures, which seem to be so important. And any cases you've recently brought in that area would be interesting.
Sure. So in terms of advertising substantiation or reasonable basis, as you talked about, a couple of basic rules. Advertising should be truthful and not misleading, so no false statements. Advertising should also be supported by a reasonable basis at the time it's made. And what a reasonable basis is depends on a few different factors. It depends on the type of product you're advertising, the type of claim, what experts in the field might require, along with other things. And typically for our substantiation cases, which are often about health or other kind of quantifiable, measurable claims, that would be competent and reliable scientific evidence. So it's a pretty strict standard, but it's flexible. Like I said, it depends on the types of claim and the types of products that you're advertising. In terms of what kinds of cases we might have brought on substantiation, reasonable basis issues, I think I would point most recently to a number of cases we brought on COVID-19 health claims. We brought those, some of them by ourselves, some of them in partnership with the Department of Justice. But those are situations where we alleged that the companies, the advertisers, were selling products that were purported to treat or cure or prevent COVID-19, but they didn't have the appropriate basis, the appropriate scientific evidence.
And I think a lot of times I see a problem where the claims are too broadly made without really limitations, so the consumers are misled as to the whole thing that could happen.
Yes.
And I think that's the material disclosure one.
Yeah, so disclosures are another issue that we deal with, and often you'll see, along with an allegation that there's a false claim or an unsubstantiated claim, there'll be an allegation that the company or the advertiser failed to disclose a material fact. And that could be an omission, it could be half-truths, and so we also do focus on making sure that appropriate disclosures are made. I guess I probably should say one thing is that, with disclosures, there are a couple of things to remember. One is that a disclosure can't cure a false claim. So disclosures are not a panacea for everything. And there are situations where we would say, a disclosure isn't going to be enough here. You just have to change the entire claim, like kind of maybe you were alluding to. Also, just the disclosures to be effective have to be clear and conspicuous. That's something that we have put out guidance on. And, they have to be noticeable. It can't be in the fine print. It has to be readable by consumers, has to be understandable in order for the consumer to see it and for it to effectively communicate a truthful claim.
When we get down to things like implied claims that come from it, that's the FTC's responsibility to show the claim was made. But once that responsibility is made, they have to make sure they have a reasonable basis.
Native advertising, just for people who might not know, is advertising that's integrated into the surrounding content, and it often appears to look similar, be formatted similarly to the surrounding content. And this all goes back to a very basic principle in advertising law that's decades old, which is that advertising should be recognizable as advertising. And we've brought cases for decades about deceptively formatted ads. So, for example, a website that might look like it's an independent news site, or a website that might look like a review platform, and in fact, these are all being run by the advertiser. So those are examples of native advertising. A few years ago, I think 2015, we put out an enforcement policy statement. The Commission put out an enforcement policy statement on deceptively formatted ads, which deals with what the principles are for avoiding deceptive native advertising and other types of deceptive formats. At the same time, we also put out a business guidance document that gives specific examples of what kinds of things we're interested in or we're concerned about in native advertising techniques. And so I'd recommend that people take a look at those to kind of see what the FTC is concerned about and how to avoid getting in trouble.
I think you're right. We'd like to make sure that our industry knows that they can really look to your guidelines. They're there.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that. And you also mentioned influencer advertising, which can be a form of native advertising, right? Because it's still it's content that is kind of formatted to look like more organic content. So in the case of an influencer, it looks like they're making a social media post, but it's advertising. The key word for both, I think, native advertising, influencer marketing, is just transparency about that what consumers are seeing is paid content. And influencer marketing falls within endorsement marketing, which is something that we also have guidance about. We have the Commission's endorsement guides, which were recently reviewed, and they're probably going to be finalized soon. And there's a lot of guidance in that about how to appropriately, do influencer and other endorsement marketing.
In the Lord and Taylor case, I think was a very interesting one with fashion influencers. Yes.
Yeah, and that one had both kind of elements, right? Because there was an issue there where there was an article in an online magazine that appeared to be editorial content. In fact, it was advertising. It wasn't adequately disclosed, as well as there were influencers who were paid to model a dress, and they weren't. It wasn't appropriately and adequately disclosed. Today we announced a settlement with multiple state AGs as well against Google and iHeartRadio. And it was an endorsement case. This was a situation where Google was advertising a phone, and they had iHeartRadio and other DJs read endorsements about the phone. The endorsements made it appear that the DJs had actually used the phone. And in fact, they hadn't, and Google had not given them the phones to be able to test it out and try it. So this is essentially kind of a basic endorsement issue, which is that, the endorsements must be truthful. You can't, say that you've used this product when you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's a concept that's been in the endorsement guides for a long time, and, we felt like it was important to send that message. We've had a good relationship with the states. We've been working with them for decades, of course, because often, our interests align very closely. And we've co-plaintiffed with states in litigation. Certainly since the AMG ruling came out, which has limited the FTC's ability to get monetary relief, we've been looking at ways to partner with the states who still have that ability. So in the Google case, the states could use their their statutory authority to get money, where the FTC may not have that. So it was a very good partnership there.
It sounds like it's one that you would probably work with a lot of states back and forth and with your staff being able to talk with them? And
Yes,
Looking
we
forward.
are often collaborating with the states on multiple matters and issues, yeah.
good. I think that you have a very special relationship with several of our self-regulatory bodies, the National Advertising Division, and also our Children's Advertising Review Unit. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship and how it works?
Sure, yeah, we've had a long-time relationship with NAD and KRU, and we really support self-regulation as an important pillar to ensure a fair marketplace. They do a great job both with their cases that come from challenges from advertisers as well as their own monitoring of the marketplace. And I definitely think that they deal with some very interesting cutting-edge issues because often those issues are surfaced in competitor challenges before they even come to the FTC. So I would definitely recommend that people follow what NAD and KRU are doing. To the extent that somebody is not participating, they decline to participate with NAD or KRU, or they don't comply, those cases will get referred to the FTC. And we take them very seriously. We take all their referrals seriously. The chief of staff of the Division of Advertising Practices handles that process. She reviews every single one.
Mm-hmm.
We often have a staff attorney also assigned to them, so we make sure to take them very seriously. A lot of times, some advertisers may not understand the process, and they don't want to participate. So the first thing we might do is encourage them to participate, so they understand. Look, you have a chance to present your view to the NAD, you can present your side. The alternative would be the FTC might open an investigation into you, and they usually err on the side of going to NAD. But certainly even with cases of where the advertiser may not comply with the NAD's recommendation, often when we get involved, they agree to make some changes. So we think it's a successful partnership.
I think it really is a wonderful partnership because it's showing the FTC support for the self-regulation program.
Yes.
And then it's also showing our self-regulation groups understanding that FTC will oftentimes make the final judgment.
There certainly are areas or certain types of cases that we may not be able to bring because of, for example, Section 230, where our Bureau Director, Sam Levine, a few weeks ago put out a blog post specifically about the issues of fake reviews that appear on platforms, like purchase negative reviews or purchase positive reviews. And he noted, there that we can't always go after the platform. Platforms might have immunity for those third-party content that appears on their sites. So there might be certain areas where we can't, where it might limit us. On the other hand, I do want to say that it doesn't always, because the platforms themselves or interactive computer services are not immune for their own conduct. So this is why we have orders against all the big platforms for their own misrepresentations for privacy policies. For Google, for example, the Google case that you mentioned.
And that's, from our standpoint, doing the right thing for the consumer. That's who we're really caring about, legally and ethically. Do you have any recommendations and views as to how this could be best accomplished by us? Do you have some ways in which we might do something with you or other ways?
Right. So I'm happy to do these kinds of interviews, to talk to your members. I think just the message is to communicate to your members is, transparency. Good advertising can be transparent and can be successful. I think, we see that even with influencer marketing, where consumers might know that their favorite influencer is being paid, but if it's good content, if they're transparent, if they have the trust of their audience, it could be a successful advertising campaign. So, it's not somebody else's responsibility. We have brought cases against ad agencies and other people in the middle to emphasize that it's everyone's responsibility. And I guess the last thing I would just say, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, is our website. The FTC has a lot of information about how to comply with the law. And we're happy to have people reproduce it, to send it out. We have a lot of guidance. We have the commissioners and bureau directors put their speeches online, and that is often a very good way to learn about the FTC's interests and priorities, and the messages that we want advertisers to take away.
You may know that we also have a certificate for advertising ethics. We really wanted to have advertisers with a certification, and it meets all the standards for certification. It's called, Certified Ethical Advertising Executive, and students are now taking this. This is now becoming included in college curriculum, as well as industry people are taking it, are doing it. So this is something I think that's important, and we also have principles and practices which are based directly from you and from the FTC that's on there as well. So we're pushing. We keep pushing them to do the right thing. And I just would ask you, would a company's efforts towards ethical practices be a mitigating factor in considering fines and regulatory sanctions? Is this something that would be helpful?
We take a lot of factors into account when we decide whether to bring in action or what's the appropriate remedy if we see something that we think is deceptive advertising. A lot of times, certain things that we might take into account would be, how was the advertising taken down quickly as soon as somebody realized that there was a problem, even before the FTC gets involved? How long was it up? What was the nature of the injury or the message to consumers? How serious was it? Also, what other processes does the advertiser have to either monitor its influencers or its endorsers, or to monitor compliance? So all of that are things we would take into account. I can't say that we wouldn't take action when it's appropriate, but on the other hand, I think we would certainly look at the totality of the circumstances and to look at that when we decide how to proceed.
That's really, I think, very helpful, because we just really want our people to do the right thing and to try to do the right thing. And I think companies are doing that now. And I'm glad to know that might have some impact down the road. But I understand you have to make a final decision on that. But we really want to be involved.
Right. And I think we are very grateful for your organization and others like it that encourage advertisers to stay on the right side of the law and of ethics. So we definitely encourage that mission.